Throughout the centuries, executions have been used to punish criminals and the most serious of offenders. We consider most executions to have occurred inside of the bloody periods in history, such as the medieval period and the Tudor era, when beheadings took place on sites of execution, such as Tower Hill. During the Tudor era, King Henry VIII would execute 70,000 people, and his daughter Mary I would also burn Protestants in bloody spectacles. But the point of executing in the past, in public, was to deter people from conducting serious offences and crimes and to keep the people in order. Today there are still a number of countries that use the death penalty, and have this, but many of them, such as the United States of America, do this in private. There are some who conduct executions in public, but these are today looked down upon for being brutal and terrifying regimes. Join us today as we look at what countries still execute criminals and have the death penalty. Remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. The death penalty today is one of the most controversial topics around the world, and when a serious and harrowing crime is committed, calls emerge in the media again to consider implementing it in Britain. Those who support the death penalty often see it as cruel, but believe it is a necessary evil, and a way of keeping society safe and keeping people away from committing the most sinister and shocking crimes. Those who are against it often mention that it does not lower murder rates, and that taking a life for someone who took a life is a means to an end. They also comment on individuals who are wrongly convicted of crimes, and how the death penalty would not reverse this. There have been many throughout history who have been removed from death row following retrials, where they have been found innocent. Today more than 70% of the countries inside of the world have abolished capital punishment, and the most recent to date is Papua New Guinea, who abolished the death penalty for all crimes. Others who have recently done so include Malawi, Kazakhstan, Sierra Leone, Chad and Burkina Faso. Malawi, however, is still debating the idea of it being outlawed. Statistics in 2020 state that 108 countries had abolished the death penalty in law for all crimes, and 144 had abolished it in law or practice. There are 28 who have effectively done this by not executing anyone in 10 years, and there are around 50 who still use the death penalty for ordinary crimes. Amnesty International's 2020 report stated that in the world there were 1,477 death sentences issued, and also that 30,000 people were living in the world under the sentence of death. The numbers of executions have declined, but issues around the reporting of executions do emerge. There are countries who secretly put prisoners to death, and this means that thousands more executions are probably carried out each year. China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq and Egypt, it's known each year, execute possibly up to 90% of the whole world's figures, and inside of these countries this is commonplace. Official data isn't available for China's death penalty statistics, and they are a secret state. The Chinese government are considered the leading executioners in the world, who without doubt put the most people to death. It's estimated that thousands are killed each year, and the Chinese judicial system states that all death penalty executions must remain private and secret. The families of those who are executed aren't even told that their family member has been killed until after the execution has been carried out. Chinese executions are carried out still by shooting, and the state still employs firing squads for this. But they also use lethal injection, which is considered more humane and less painful than a gunshot, and it's claimed the Chinese government are heading towards using lethal injection altogether. Execution vans were also used across the states, and it's said this was a cost-effective way of killing prisoners, as a special death row system isn't needed to carry out the sentence. Iran also executes many people each year. Often hundreds, and most of the executions are carried out in secret. Iran often faces criticism for its use of torture, in which confessions are extracted from, and that the death sentence is often applied to crimes considered less serious. Egypt also utilises the death sentence and has seen an increase in executions, and there are many human rights organisations that accuse the Egyptian government of conducting secret and unfair trials, and also using torture. They say that to reduce political dissent, executions take place. Iraq also uses it, and it does not restrict the sentence to just serious crimes, meaning that people who are found guilty of smuggling items, stealing or other offences are killed. The majority of executions in Iraq are based on hanging, and another nation that uses execution is Saudi Arabia. Shockingly, in 2020, they were the only country known to have carried out an execution by beheading, and in the past they executed for many more crimes than they do at the moment. However, the use of the death sentence remains a tenuous issue for the King of Saudi Arabia and the government, as they try to shift towards being a country with more accepted values in the Western world. In March 2020, however, Saudi Arabia sparked international outrage when they executed 81 people en masse, the largest mass execution in the country's history. Similarly to China, Japan also uses execution, and the dates are not announced to the public. Usually, a prisoner is isolated from other inmates hours before the execution occurs. Then after this, the prison guards and officials inform the press and the public what has happened. In Japan, they use hanging to take lives, and the condemned are also placed in a hood before they then release a trapdoor. Most of the cases in Japan involve the death penalty, revolve around murderers who have killed many people or are serial killers. Japan executes the most heinous of offenders. South Korea utilises execution also, and they also use the hanging method with a rope. If a criminal has been found guilty of an offence that affects the military, they are then shot by a military firing squad. There are dozens of prisoners on death row in South Korea awaiting their execution. But the most famous country that still uses the death penalty is the United States of America. Different states have different laws on the issue, and some use it and some do not. Texas is the state that leads with 573 executions in 2021, followed by Oklahoma with 116 and 113 in Virginia. There are more states that have abolished the death penalty, and as of February 2022, it is legal in 27 states. There are around 2,500 prisoners sitting on death row for various serious crimes, from terrorism offences to mass murder. The US has used since 1976 5 different methods of execution. Most prisoners select lethal injection, which is the default method, but still in law, electrocution, hanging, lethal gas and firing squads may be used. But lethal injection is considered the most painless, despite there being a number of times where it has been botched. There are also other countries who have issued a moratorium or a pause on execution, which is considered a first step towards abolition. In Africa, the countries who use the death penalty are Algeria, that still uses a firing squad, Botswana, who uses hanging, Cameroon, that uses shooting and hanging, the Central African Republic, Comoros, Egypt, that has a high figure of killings, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Swaziland, Ethiopia, Gambia, Ghana, Kenya, Lesotho, Liberia, Libya, Mali, Mauritania, which has a huge list of crimes that carry the death penalty, Morocco, Niger, Nigeria, Somalia, that still uses stoning as a method of execution, South Sudan, that uses the garrote or strangulation as a method of killing, Tanzania, Tunisia, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. A number of these countries are currently investigating the usefulness in terms of crime prevention that the death penalty has, and a number have not executed someone for decades. In the Americas, those countries who still have capital punishment are Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Brazil, that still carry out executions for military personnel, and Chile also does this too, Cuba, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, who execute for crimes ranging from terrorism to piracy, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, and of course the USA. In Asia, Afghanistan use hanging, shooting and stoning. Bahrain use the penalty, as do Bangladesh, Brunei, China, India, Indonesia, who execute people for a large amount of crimes. There is a moratorium on execution in the country, but there are no plans to abolish the death penalty permanently. Iran also use it and also use stoning. Iraq has a large amount of executions. It's still used in the military in Israel, and the last execution to take place there was of Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust. Japan also executes, as does Jordan, Kuwait, Laos, Lebanon, Malaysia, Maldives, Myanmar, North Korea, who it's claimed still use decapitation, and it's also claimed that North Korea still use public executions. Oman still has a death sentence, as does Pakistan, Palestine, where Hamas perform vigilante executions, Qatar, who use firing squad, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Korea, Sri Lanka, Syria, Taiwan. In Taiwan, they use gunshot to the heart at close range as a method, where the condemned lies on a mattress, where a doctor marks where the heart is. The executioner then shoots at the marker. If the condemned is an organ donor, they are shot in the head instead. Tajikistan also executes criminals, as does Thailand, the UAE, Vietnam and Yemen. In Europe, Belarus is the only country that practices a death penalty. Inside the country, the laws allow capital punishment for a number of crimes, including genocide, murder with aggravating circumstances, intention to provoke international tension and law, or terrorist offences. Russia does retain the death penalty, however it's rarely used, and even though it's still in law, authorities don't tend to use it. In Oceania, there is only one country that uses capital punishment too, and that is Tonga, who have not used it since 1982, but it still remains in law. So still today there are thousands of executions carried out each year inside of different countries. Many different methods, even including beheading and stoning, are used, but most countries tend to use hanging, or lethal injection, or even firing squads. There are many people around the world who want the death penalty reinstating in lands around the world, but there are also many others who want it abolishing all over. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.